All right, good evening, and thank you for coming. My name's Jim Proctor. I'm professor and director of the Environmental Studies program at Lewis & Clark, and finally, after one full year in preparation, we are so excited to be here at last with our special guest, Elizabeth Demaray, for the opening keynote event of Lewis & Clark College's 18th Annual Environmental Affairs Symposium on the theme Environment Across Boundaries, or what you will hear referred to by the code name ENVX. You may ask, what boundaries will we cross in the next 3 days? And I'd invite you to make your own list as we go. The answer to this question is itself a question. What are the contemporary boundaries of environmental thought and practice? Or what is not environment? Or, pardon my grammar, unenvironmental? These sorts of thought experiments may help us peer beyond boundaries we had failed to notice. Elizabeth Demaray's keynote and exhibition tonight, to which a number of you Lewis & Clark students have contributed, and the many student-organized events over the next few days based on 5 thematic threads. 1, controlling the Columbia, a religious and political history. 2, food sovereignty, connecting health, city planning, and socioeconomics. 3, limits to renewable energy, designing the future. 4, the power of art, evaluating environmental movements. And 5, the concise title winner, unsettling sustainability, will invite us all to embrace a bigger notion of environment, a fuller sense of environmental practice than we have inherited. Let's look forward to what we will learn together. I'm pleased to welcome to the podium Jayne Atkinson, our Vice President and Provost of Lewis & Clark College.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome to all of you tonight. I just have to begin by marveling at the transformation of this room and all the possibilities for transgressing boundaries that we find here. I see some of you are already engaged with the artwork and are making connections, and I'm sure this evening we're going to find many ways to explore and engage with this room and the possibilities that are inherent in it. I mean, really, this is an embodiment, I think, it makes palpable the theme of the symposium this year, asking us to transcend, to rethink, to act beyond boundaries. Jim has already hinted at this, introducing the thematic threads that weave through this week's program. And I'm very envious of those of you who are going to be able to stay with the entire program from beginning to end. My job tonight is to say something about environmental scholarship and engagement at Lewis & Clark as an enactment of vital dimensions of the college's mission and commitments. This week's symposium is, I think, a wonderful demonstration of those commitments. I'll just rattle off a few and leave you to ponder them as the week goes on. Environmental studies at Lewis & Clark is rooted in the liberal arts, and it's grounded in what we call critical open-mindedness. This is defined in the strategic plan as a capacity to see the world from many perspectives and make independent judgments on which views should finally shape one's own choices and actions. Rethinking and questioning boundaries, the intellectual creative moves called for in this week's sessions are congruent with the goals of liberal arts, liberal learning, and critical thinking. Environmental studies, and this symposium in particular, are transdisciplinary endeavors, engaging, challenging, blending, extending various fields of scholarly discourse in order to explore and to create new forms of knowledge and understanding. Environmental studies at Lewis & Clark is an incubator of experimentation, a driver of innovation, a site that generates new ideas and possibilities, intellectual, technological, and experiential, and they spill over across disciplinary and divisional boundaries to transform how we live and work together. Consistent with the college's core themes, what's happening here is global in scope and attentive and, I would say, questioning of values, dimensions of diversity and sustainability, and how they might connect and support a just society at any scale. Environmental studies in this symposium, I think, are marvelous examples of Lewis and Clark's commitment to bringing together theory and practice, preparing students intellectually by immersing them in scholarly and creative practice, and in the engagement of practical realities that may lie beyond the classroom and the library. And faculty-student collaboration, a hallmark of a Lewis and Clark education, is integral to the development and the format of this symposium, and will be very much in evidence throughout the week. So my appreciation goes to all the students, faculty, and staff who've invested so much thought, imagination, time, and energy to developing this symposium. And thanks as well to our visiting presenters, at least one of whom has been engaging with members of this college campus community for some time now. These presenters who are bringing their talents to bear on this collaborative project. I wish you all an enlightening and rewarding week of engaged critical inquiry. Thanks for being here, and best wishes for a great symposium.
Thank you so much, Jayne. Before we proceed, we welcome your involvement in tonight's event in two ways. First, we will be distributing index cards on which you can write questions for our keynote, Elizabeth Demaray. After her opening remarks, we'll move to reception and view her art, and I'll read selected questions for Elizabeth to answer as we move around. Let's give it a try, okay? Second, for tonight and throughout this very visual symposium, I invite you to share your experience on Instagram using the hashtag LCENVS. That's LCENVS Instagram. We plan to curate the images and thoughts you share over the next few days. I'd now like to quickly introduce and thank, I perhaps can't thank them too much, some special people who've put countless hours into planning ENVX over the last year. First, and you can stand up, or I guess you could just wave, I really want to acknowledge our admin, Nate Stoll, who has put tons and tons of time. Dude can do the big picture and the details. That's great. Nate, thank you. Many students have played a role in organizing ENVX. In fact, just raise your hands if you've done something connected to symposium this year. Just raise your hands, students, if you've done any something connected symposium. So you see quite a few hands going up. I'd like to acknowledge four that deserve our particular thanks. These are the four ENVX co-chairs. And if you could please, yes, stand, we want to see you. I'd like to thank Sarah Goldstein, Annika Primaro, Jacob Weiss, Jacob's in the back. He's already standing. And Drew Williamson. So congratulations to all organizers. We made it. This is very exciting. All right. So our core chairs have worked quite closely with Elizabeth Demaray in planning her exhibition and the three-day event. I've invited Drew then to come to the podium and introduce our special guest artist and Rutgers University faculty member, Elizabeth Demaray. Go ahead, Drew.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you again so much for coming out. We really appreciate it. What a great gathering. This is awesome. I'm extremely pleased to introduce Elizabeth Demaray, our visiting sculptor and eco-artist who comes all the way from New York City. Elizabeth is also an associate professor of fine arts at Rutgers Camden in New Jersey. And as an artist who's concerned primarily with the relationship between the built environment and the natural world, Demaree often pairs with scientists to create artworks that concern the idea of biotopes, crossing boundaries between humor and sadness, helplessness and independence, human and non-human. Elizabeth has a background in cognitive neuropsychology, and it shows often in her work in the way she addresses complex issues surrounding natural and built environments. Her work often features modifications of both of these worlds to highlight uncommon ways in which we interact and to help us better appreciate aspects of the other. Writing about her work, Richard Klein, exhibition director at the Aldrich Museum, states, Demaray provokes complex questions concerning memory, knowledge, and the collaborative cognitive viewing process that exists between the artist and the viewer, while making a body of work that has consistently confounded expectations by creating connections between diverse and often contradictory bodies of knowledge. Much in the same vein, the Environmental Studies program here at Lewis and Clark strives to diverge from common environmental discourse. We believe in and practice this by looking at contemporary environmental issues through a variety of lenses to foster new ways of thinking about the problem and possible solutions. We're delighted to have Elizabeth as our keynote because her work mirrors our concept theme of environment across boundaries beautifully. It's my hope that she will help inspire everybody here, you, me, us, to ask meaningful new questions in new ways about the environment. Please join me in giving an extremely warm welcome to Elizabeth Demaray.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Gosh, is this too loud? It seems kind of loud up here for me. Okay. Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here. I would really like to thank the symposium co-chairs who I've been pairing with for some time for this project, for this show and this talk, the environmental studies people and the entire Lewis and Clark community. It's been such a pleasure to be here, to be interfacing with you, to be listening to what your thoughts are, what your concerns are, what your interests are. It's just been such a pleasure. So thank you so much for having me. Gosh, I almost feel like after Drew's opening remarks, I don't really have to say anything. But I do want to say I'm a fine artist. So when fine artists talk to people about things, we usually talk through our artwork. So I'm going to show you a series of artworks. My own pieces often involve the concept of a biotope, which is a small environment where multiple species overlap. And it may also involve the idea of trans-species giving, which is this notion that the commonalities that exist between living things are such that we might be able to give other organisms a hand up, sort of regardless of how misguided or culturally hamstrung we might be by our own culture's interactions with the natural world. So, so in any event, tonight, so a lot of the work that I do has to do with art and science collaborations. I make alternative forms of housing for land hermit crabs. This is a project called Lichen for Skyscrapers, where I'm culturing lichen on the sides of skyscrapers in New York City. But tonight I want to talk about the work that's over there, out in the middle. And sort of the permutations of it and what it is. Of note, there's a wonderful, the sculpture students, Jess Perlett's Sculpture 1 class, paired with me to upholster stones. I'm going to talk about for a little while about stone upholstery, but there are some absolutely beautiful upholstered stones over there that I was just so thrilled to see, and I'm really hoping that you guys all go take a look at it. So for just a moment or two, I want to talk a little bit about maybe why. I've been getting lots of art questions since I've been here, and so I think I want to talk for just a moment or two about why we make art. What we might be able to get out of art and maybe what we can do with it. So instead of addressing these issues, why we make art, Wisława Zambrowska says, I prefer the absurdity of writing poems to the absurdity of not writing poems. And in thinking about what we can maybe get out of art, we have Sol LeWitt in his 25 sentences on conceptual art, sentence 2 and 3. And Sol LeWitt says, rational judgments repeat rational judgments. Irrational judgments lead to new experience. And lastly, probably the reason that I'm making pieces is that the point of much art is to say things that can't be simply stated. If you can kind of simply state something, you don't really have a reason to make a piece about it. But what I really like is the complexity of things that you can discuss when you make a piece of artwork. When you make a piece of work, it can simultaneously be ugly and beautiful, or compelling and very sad. So tonight I want to talk about the pieces that are out there. And the first piece that I want to talk about is this piece. This piece is called Giant Sequoia. It is a giant sequoia wearing a knit sweater. I started knitting sweaters for plants when I was in graduate school. At the time, I was very frustrated for a number of different reasons. The materials that I was using weren't working out, but I realized that what I really wanted to try to communicate through this work was my desire to somehow help the natural world, but my feelings of that my efforts were small and ineffectual. So I started knitting sweaters for plants, and while I was sort of going through this process, I got a really amazing residency. I got a residency to go to this great place called the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, and it's in northeastern Maine. I'm from California originally. At that time, I had never been to Maine. I didn't really know anything about Maine, but I knew that there were a lot of rocks there. And I also knew I probably couldn't take a lot of materials with me from California, so I thought, well, I'll make something out of rocks. And I started thinking about it, and I realized that really the only thing I really wanted to do with a rock was to try to make it a little softer. And that led to this piece, and this piece is called Upholstered and Unupholstered Stone. And it's kind of, this is great, I can only talk going this direction with my mic. But the interesting thing about stones when you try to upholster them is that you can't actually pound into the object. And because of that, you have to very carefully map your surfaces in order to have equal stress in every direction. Do I have any rock upholster people with me tonight? Anybody from school? You've got one over here. Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, huh, you guys? In any event, it's very interesting because when you get the patterns right, the pieces lay flat on the stone, and the two-dimensional pattern pieces that allow us to make these three-dimensional objects kind of look like this. This is a pattern from a sort of a simple stone. So I was really enjoying myself. I was upholstering stones and making them all just a little softer and leaving them. Originally, I would leave them out in the woods, but pretty soon they came into my studio, and I would set them up in my studio, and people didn't really know what they were. They kind of thought, well, maybe these are pillows, like, what are these things? And not only that, but like, what have you been doing? Like, because I would be out in the woods finding stones and rolling them around and things. And what I really wanted people to do is I really wanted people to interact with these objects because they're hard, they're potentially violent. So I was thinking a lot about this, and that led to this piece. And this piece is called Good Baseball Rocks, Please Hold. And interestingly enough, you can completely cover a spherical object. There's a real baseball in the back of that photo. But you can completely cover a spherical object with two flat pattern pieces if you keep it in constant curvature. So I was up in Maine, and I went and learned how to do a baseball stitch from a shoemaker in Maine. And the other thing I love about this piece is because I call it Good Baseball Rocks, Please Hold, the museums that own it, they have to let people hold it. Because you can't say that on a tag and not let someone pick it up. So I usually get my own guard because they're like so worried that people are going to to take one and put it in their pocket. But the thing that I really enjoy about this piece is you get to physically interact with it. So you get to physically find yourself holding a rock and kind of what that means. And because I really want people to interact with it, and people weren't really picking them up very much over there, I'm just going to pass this one around while I'm talking. So if you want to just hold it and pass it down, you can pass it over the aisle, and maybe you guys can go, whoever gets it at the very end, if you could take it back to the stand in the back at the end of the talk, I'd be so grateful. So these are called Good Baseball Rocks, Please Hold. And at the time I was doing this a little tiny bit after grad school, I had this amazing residency at this place called the Headland Center for the Arts in Marin, California. The Headland Center for the Arts is an old military base. So the Art Center is actually part of this military base, and there at the Headlands is a historic Nike Hercules missile site. These are conventional and they are conventional and also nuclear. They have conventional and nuclear capability. But I was up in my studio and I was making these baseball rocks, and I was thinking about the fact that a lot of competitive sports, every culture has sports, and what we're doing is we're learning how to be hunters, and we're also learning warfare. When people are playing competitive sports, it's sort of like we're learning how to be warriors. So I was thinking about this idea of throwing rocks and things, and I suddenly realized that my studio was up the hill over these missiles, basically these giant lawn darts that you can sort of throw at people, right? And the most amazing thing is on the weekend, little children would come. They would have like, busloads of school children, but there was like one weekend every month where people would come out and you could wash the missiles. And so I'd be up in my studio and people would come and they would be washing the missiles. And I thought, this is so amazing because most of us, I never knew how big a missile was. But the idea of like touching these really hard objects just kind of stuck in my head. And I started thinking, wow, what would I do with a missile? And I thought, wow, well, I really wanted to upholster it. So I went down the hill to the missile site, and I took a baseball rock with me, and the guys at the missile site were so nice, and people from the Art Center hadn't really interfaced with anybody at the missile site, and there had apparently been a little bad blood because the building where my studio was had been the old barracks for the missile site, and the former director didn't like what the architect did and didn't like the fact that there were artists in there, and who knows what. But he was gone, and the guys that were there were really nice. And I was showing them these baseball rocks, and they said, well, Elizabeth, why don't you come and do a piece at the missile site? And I said, whoa, I'm so thrilled that you said that because there really is a piece that I want to do. I would like to upholster one of the warheads. And they all stopped and they all looked at each other like, well, I don't know. And I said, but listen, this is going to sound crazy to you, but I've been upholstering stones. I can do this. I know I can do this without hurting the object. I can do a hand patterning on it and not hurt the object. And it astounded me. They actually let me do it. That was the amazing thing. And they made me an honorary park ranger. I got to have a green outfit. And this image here is actually in the silo. The interesting thing about the Headlands is it's right by the Golden Gate Bridge. So all these large hills were actually tunneled out and were silos. So this silo actually would drop down like another 6 floors. But if you look up the hill, do you see that building out? That was my studio. So I could actually like look down the hill. And I spent a week in the silo upholstering these missiles. I chose the oldest one because it had this beautiful rounded belly. And just like those baseball rocks, I was really interested in the rounded pattern shapes that I could get with it. And so I spent a week upholstering this thing and having wonderful discussions with the guys at the missile sites about weapons and all kinds of interesting things. And then I took the pattern pieces back to this thing called the project space at the Headlands and cut it out. I actually quilted, oh my God, it was 800 feet of light baby blue satin. I wanted the thing to look like it might have come from a mattress. I wanted like a pattern on it that we would relate to in terms of size. And I cut the thing out and I started sewing it together and it just grew and grew and grew. I mean, the thing was massive, this massive object. And the day of the opening, I took it back and I put it on the missile and it fit like a glove. It was just extraordinary. And so we had an opening at the missile site, and I had all the people from the Art Center come, and all the old military guys were there, and we had a wonderful time. And they liked it so much they actually kept it on the missile for like a month, and TV crews came and stuff like that. But at the end of that time, I got to take it off the missile, and I took it back to the project space at the Headlands, and I stuffed it, which gave me my own soft-bodied, stuffed variant of the original form. And so this is the rear end of the Nike Hercules missile. That's the center area where that little X is where basically basically it's where the giant stick of dynamite goes that shoots these missiles into space. So that's sort of a stone upholstery story, and all of you guys who are now upholstering stones, go forth into the world and go upholster things. It's wonderful. So another site-specific piece that I thought I would talk about because it's up is this piece. This is called Half. All the apples on one tree in an orchard halved. I climbed into an apple tree in Occidental California, and I halved all the apples while they were still on the branches. And it's so interesting with artworks because they can mean so many different things. I mean, I was thinking about notions of Eden. I was thinking about industrial food production. What our Eden is. But I was the thing that was really stuck in my head and was really sort of, I think, motivating me to make this piece was the idea of half. You know how people say, like, oh, the glass is half full or the glass is half empty? That's always really bugged me. Like, I wanted some kind of situation where half was really a definite state. So at any rate, half all the apples on one tree in an orchard have. These are large Cibachrome photographs that are shown in a museum, kind of like they are there, just kind of side by side, where one of them is blown up to the size of the actual tree. And interestingly enough, the day that I did this piece, it was like the last day I could possibly do this piece. It was really hard to find an apple orchard that was willing to let an artist come and do a piece in one of their trees. But the day that I did this, it was a terrible storm, and there was water everywhere, and so all the apples got kind of slicked, and they didn't oxidize, and so it's sort of like the miracle of the tree. So I'm going to talk about just a couple of other little site-specific pieces that relate to some of the work that's over there. This piece is called Listening Stations for Birds That Play Human Music. I made this piece for a sculpture garden and wooded parklands in the outskirts of Philadelphia. And I was, myself and the videographer that I made this with, James Walsh, we were sort of interested in the idea that birds are bombarded by human noise on a constant basis, but nobody has, really, truly, there's no studies, nobody's ever studied birds to find out what kind of human music they like. And we thought, well, that's just silly. Like, we're bombarding them with noise. We should find this out. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of birds that pay a lot of attention to human songs. In our area, there's the catbird. There's the mockingbird. And there's also other species of birds. The lyrebird, for example, has actually learned human song and taught it to its offspring. This is in national parklands in Australia. I think it was an ornithologist, perhaps it was a ranger, was walking through national parklands in National Park in Australia in 1969, and he heard lyrebirds singing what he thought might be a human tune. Got recordings of it, tracked it down, found out that a flautist in the 1930s had actually had a pet lyrebird with a broken wing and had played its songs. And when that lyrebird was let back out into the park, it taught those songs to its offspring that taught it to other offspring. So it's just, it's so extraordinary. These animals, they pay so much attention to human sound. So in any event, we made this listening station for birds that plays human music. And each of these poles plays a different genre of human music. And we did little short loops, 20 minutes loops. One plays classical, one plays rock, one plays country, and one plays jazz. And it was a little difficult to do these way out in the middle of the woods, but this was on a sort of a secluded nature trail. But interestingly enough, the most difficult part of this project was trying to decide what tunes we were going to put on each pole. Like myself and my collaborator, I've never had arguments with anyone like this. Both of us had such strong opinions and nothing to go on, like nothing to base our decisions by. Finally, we decided that what we had to do is, because this is an example of trans-species giving, where we're giving to another species, when you give a gift to somebody, generally you try to give the best gift that you can. So we decided that what we were going to do is we were going to put human masterpieces on each tune, on each pole. So we selected a small little set of human masterpieces to put on each pole. Interestingly enough, I'm doing this piece now with a computer scientist who's also a computer vision specialist at this place called the DigiHuman Lab, which is a laboratory that I helped set up in the computer science department at Rutgers, which is a platform for artistic uses of computer vision and machine learning. And what we're doing is we're making something called Pandora Bird. And Pandora Bird is a version of Pandora Radio that we are adapting to wild feeder birds. So at each listening station, we're actually going to be able to have a little video camera. We're writing algorithms so that the camera can recognize individual bird species as well as individual birds. So we can actually figure out what specific birds like to listen to while they feed. And it's a Pandora system, so it'll generate databases for different species. And it's also an iPad app. We're actually going to stick a little iPad in each one, so you can get your own version of Pandora Bird and put it outside, and perhaps even let the birds in your immediate environment choose the kind of music that you might listen to. So in any event, the next piece is kind of the flip side of that. It's kind of like, what does this life form provide for us? And this is called The Songs We Sing. There's a version of this on one of the computers back there. And this piece is an homage to E.O. Wilson. I'm sure most of you in here know who E.O. Wilson is. He's sort of our most eminent natural scientist. The book that he just published, he postulates that within this century, maybe not my lifetime, but you guys who are students here, probably your lifetime, he believes that we're going to see a loss of 50% of all species that are currently alive on the face of the Earth if we continue at our current rate of ecological destruction. So the songs we sing considers what us humans are going to do when our companion species are gone. You know, how are you and me going to create a sense of beauty and calm when we've lost our companion species? And it postulates that maybe we can do this by creating fictive environments. In the Songs We Sing project, this is a place that I showed it in Amsterdam called the Lloyd. For the Songs We Sing project, a number of you guys have actually participated in this. Let me see your hands. Who's made a bird call? I need more birds. If any of you guys want to shoot me an email, I need some more birds. Like tomorrow morning, I need birds. What I do is, or what I have people do is, I have them open up a website that basically shows the different species in a different area. And you can listen to the different calls, and it's quite wonderful. Many of these birds will have calls for different purposes. And I'm asking people to choose one bird call, to practice it just 1 or 2 times. I really don't want anybody that makes really good bird calls. Like, I want bad bird calls. Just practice it 1 or 2 times. And then if you have a version of GarageBand on your laptop, I have you just record it, do a little audio recording. And then what I do is I sample the audio recordings and I place them in the immediate vicinity of the communities that have created these calls. So as you walk through these areas, what you hear humans attempting to make bird calls, and they kind of weave into all of the other sound in the immediate environment. But the really interesting thing about them is, yeah, maybe four could perhaps be some sort of animal. But number 5, usually 1 in 5 really sounds like somebody is attempting to make, it's a human attempting to make an animal sound, which is really wonderful, because what that does is it sort of throws everything into question, right? If something's a little wrong in your environment, you pay attention to the things around you. And I usually show this piece. We have these little audio recordings. We put them at different locations. And usually I'll hang a little sign up that has a website. But that's kind of it. That's really all I do. This is called The Songs We Sing. And on the back computer is a series of performances where I gather the people that have made the bird calls. And we do a series of very short little, how do I put it? We do I don't want to say call and response, but we do a little series of short movements where I have either myself or a conductor. I was working with an Icelandic conductor on the West Coast, has us do kinds of different sorts of activities with these bird calls. So hopefully Thursday night at the banquet, I'm hoping that all of you guys that have done bird calls will show up wearing black and white, and we're going to do a little performance. And when we do that performance, we're going to record it. And the DigiHuman Lab is going to code it to determine if we have actually increased the level of biodiversity right here. Because there's all these wonderful programs that take audio and are able to code it for the level of biodiversity at a given site. So what's up right now is a song cycle that you guys can all go and listen to. If the fates are with us, we're going to do this on Thursday and make our own recordings, which I hope I can get. Perhaps by Wednesday I can put a recording on there just of us making the calls individually. So anyway, this is the place. This is the DigiHuman Lab where we're sending this they're going to be attempting to code our recordings. This next piece is called the Endangered Species Recipe Book. Animals that have gone extinct or are going extinct, and the recipes that we have used to eat them. There's a version of it back there. It's growing. Everywhere I go, I make it a little bit bigger. If anyone has recipes for animals in the Pacific Northwest that you would like to share with me, it would be my pleasure to increase the Endangered Species Recipe Book. This piece is a collaboration between myself and the artist Hugo Bastidas, who's an extraordinary oil painter and also happens to be my husband. But at any rate, it's really great. We're both oil painting now, which has been a very interesting experience for me. But you can go back there and see these paintings, and with each painting, and typically what we do is we try to find the earliest known lithograph drawing of the animal, and then the earliest recipe that I can find of us humans eating the animal. And on the pages to the book, which are these oil paintings on paper, it's usually just a piece of the recipe. Sometimes it's the entire recipe, but there's a clipboard back there that does have the entire recipe. They're not all translated into English. You'll find some really old German and Latin and some other interesting things. This is the Iberian hare. This summer, we did this project at this wonderful place in Berlin called Zagras Projects, and talk about transdisciplinary boundaries. This is an art institution that is dedicated to marrying fine and culinary art. So we actually had a dinner. No endangered animals were eaten at this dinner, but it was really interesting. It was an approximation of a lot of very, very ancient German recipes from this German and Roman recipes from that specific spot, and we did some things that were quite wonderful. But anyway, you can go to my website and you can see you can go and see what the recipes were and what we did, and there's a video of it. So the next piece I'm going to talk about is for potted plants. And this piece is called the Indaplant Project, an act of trans-species giving. This project is an homage to a cyberneticist by the name of Valentino Brattenberg. He's an Australian-Italian cyberneticist who's no longer with us, who was doing some really extraordinary work in the 70s, making very, very simple vehicles. They're called Brattenberg vehicles, and the schematics are based off of the neurological design of flies. So there's these very simple vehicles for attraction or avoidance. And initially I had planned to just do this project on Brattenberg vehicles, but as you all know, there's these wonderful things now called Arduinos, which allow you to do some kind of simple and sometimes slightly more complex kinds of programming. So I'm going to play you a little video. Like, this is a 3-minute long video. There's a much longer video in back that talks about the first Floorboard test run and what led up to that and what the current state of the project is. But this is just a little tiny 3-minute video that talks about the project. We'll see if we got good sound or not.
For centuries, humans have been caring for potted plants in an effort to make our environment a little more like theirs, sometimes with disastrous consequences. But a team of artists and scientists at Rutgers University are working to change all of this. They are creating Indaplants, robotic supports that allow potted house plants to freely seek sunlight and water. This effort is being spearheaded by artist Elizabeth Demaray and engineer Dr. Quincy Zhao. For Demaree, the impetus behind the project is artistic.
My interest in creating this piece lies in the poetic implications of taking an immobile object like a houseplant and potentially turning it into a free agent. So depending upon programming or emergent properties, each endoplant may end up exhibiting potentially cooperative or even competitive kinds of behavior.
So here's my office in the School of Engineering and Aeronautics. Now we have 3 endoplants up and running, and they were capable of finding the sunlight and go to the water station to support the needs of the species they carry. And in the morning, the robots will come out from the office and take sun baths near the window, and when they need the water, they will go to the water station, and the people who walk by will give them a cup of water.
This one always has problems. The last one doesn't really work. That sign says if there's an endoplant in the vicinity,
I think
water
it's
it.
really nice to have a little bit greenish in the engineering building because it's always machines over here and there. And the second thing, I guess we just found a home by it.
Yay. Okay, so so the current endoplant configuration, you guys can kind of see the sort of the story and actually a really nice description of how we've built it and what we're doing. This project is actually a collaboration between myself and the engineer, Dr. Shinzi Zhao, the computer scientist Ahmed Egamel, and our biologist is a gentleman by the name of Simeon Kuchoni. And we're doing all kinds of interesting things with this. We're trying to figure out how to get the plant to actually power the robot. We're with Simeon Kuchoni, I'm making these things that collect transpired water. We're looking at self-sufficient watering systems for the robots, which has actually led to this. We figured out these kind of nice sort of little transpiration collectors that allow you to purify water. And the transpiration collector that we're designing for this is we're actually making it for this artwork that you're looking at right here, which is called Wetlands by Mary Mattingly. This is on the Schuylkill River by University of Pennsylvania right now. Ahmed Egamel, who's our computer scientist, this is an algorithm for a plant. We're putting little Raspberry Pi video cameras on the plants, and we're allowing them to sort of recognize each other, and if their neighbors are wilted or if themselves are wilted. So we're coming up with ways that the plants can recognize each other, and we're also sort of attempting to close the feedback loop between the plant and the robot. And in this regard, we are considering ways to create a cyber-physical system that allows the robot much clearer ideas about sort of what the plant is experiencing. So this is Simeon Kuchoni measuring the potential in at the top of the leaves in the presence of various sort of hazardous gases. So hopefully, we'll see what comes of this. But if we're able to do this, we're interested in sort of trying to create kind of a new paradigm in terms of the way us humans communicate with these other life forms. Because of course, if the plant can communicate with its robotic carriage, then we can also sort of understand what it's experiencing. We're also making kits. So we're attempting to make endoplant kits so that all of you guys can put your plants on a robotic carriage and make your own endoplant. And that's really great because that also allows us to crowdsource programming and fabrication and all kinds of other interesting things. So that's the kind of current state of the project. You guys can go to my website if any of you want to participate in the endoplant project. You're welcome to do that. The next project, the the next project that I'm hoping that we're going to do is called, so the next Floorboard project that I hope to be tackling is titled the Floorboard Navigator. The Navigator is our answer to meeting the new needs of natural life forms. This floorboard combines the basic features of the Indoplant with GPS, autonomous driving technology, and constant online weather updates, so that an endangered plant species threatened with climate change may travel to more favorable conditions. With climate scientists predicting vastly unpredictable weather patterns, this project maintains that innovative technological solutions can be brought to bear upon a great number of problems involving the present existence and future survival of many life forms. The intended audience of the Floorboard Navigator is someone who, while driving in a car or crossing a street, might pause to contemplate a slowly ambulating floorboard bearing on its back an endangered plant destined for better places. All right, so that's the end of my presentation, you guys. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I don't know if we want to do questions over there or here. There's a few left. So, should I stay here, or do you want to go do the questions down below?
Yeah, we'll go do that.
We'll do the questions down below.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. So here's what we're going to try. Am I up?
Are you? Oh, is it?
Be on. I think I'm on now.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it. I got to process that a little bit, Elizabeth, before I talk here. So thank you so much. You've got our heads are kind of spinning here. So please, I'm encouraging you to pass on your index cards to me. Maybe pass them to the aisles, and we'll pick them up if you have any questions, and you can write them and just get them to me at any time. I'll try to read as many as I can as we move into the reception, which will be immediately behind us, with, of course, the reception goodies, which are farther behind us. And please join me in thanking Elizabeth for your visit to Portland and Lewis and Clark. Please join us in reception in around the exhibition area behind us. Thank you all very much.